We're there. So, hello everybody and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us again. We have, I think everybody on has been on before. I think Katie, you may be a new person to join us potentially, and I see that we've got Leslie that's just coming on as well. So Leslie, you're very, very welcome. It's good to see you. Thank you all for joining us. So just I always give a little bit of a brief rundown at the beginning. I'm sure some of you will have heard this many times, but just to let you know how we've come to do these webinars. So as Sam was saying, I think we're week 10, 11, 12 for some people. We're starting to forget how many weeks we're in, and some of us are starting to forget our own names. I've just put on my top for the webinar. I'm just feeling a bit I'm filling it out a bit too much. So I need to get on the Pilates, Marion.
Absolutely.
You'll be slapping my wrist later on. I know. So the reason we set up these webinars is because we wanted to make sure that we were delivering what you guys need at the right time, hence the evening webinars. If you have anything you guys want to actually see in a webinar over the next few weeks, let us know. We're kind of working on the next program of sessions. We have got a number of really amazing speakers coming up over the next few weeks. Tonight, this is Marion's 4th webinar so far. 3 of them are recorded and on our website and on YouTube. One of them, the audio is recorded because I messed up for the first time. But Marion has done the most amazing job for us the last 3 fortnights. We've all learned so much, and I'm certain that we're going to learn even more tonight. So without further ado, Marion, thank you again for giving us your time. You are an incredible lead physiotherapist at Great Ormond Street Hospital, which is a world-renowned centre of excellence for neuromuscular. And yeah, proud to have you here. So over to you, Marion.
Good evening, people in lockdown land still. Tonight we're going to talk mostly about splints, but it's not all about splints. So that's where we're going to start. I know a lot of people have been locked down for a while, and if you haven't been locked down, your physio services, your orthotics services have all been closed down. Many of you haven't seen your physio or have only had phone calls. So what we're going to do is look at splints, look at when we're wearing them, look at problems with them. We're going to look at how we manage problems with them and what we're doing about them. Have we found the need for different splints? And I did mean to bring a Trilok splint for you all to see, and I forgot, but Triloks we're using more and more. They're really a useful splint, but we'll discuss those in a minute. The first thing I want to say is, irrespective of lockdown, irrespective of homeschooling and all the things that go with it, what we are finding, and I know parents are finding, is that things are slowing down at home. We always knew that school holidays were a tough time for keeping up activity, keeping up exercise, keeping up motivation. So if we've been stuck at home already for 10, 12 weeks, we are finding that people are getting a little bit more iffy about the idea of wearing splints all the time. Weather's getting hotter again, not at school. You know, we're sleeping later in the mornings, we don't want our splints on. It's getting to be a problem. And tight ankles really does impact on function. So what we need to do is look at our night splints. And what we have is a night splint. Now, I know many parents and many children will say, oh, they're too hot in the summer, we don't want to wear them, there's a problem with them. But honestly, we do need to be wearing splints. If we can't manage them at night in bed, while we're sitting doing our schoolwork, if we're not wandering around, while we're sitting on Xboxes, on PlayStations, if we don't have our feet hanging down, no, I agree, they are not on a stretch. We are not looking to stretch feet in splints. We'll come into that in a minute. We are looking to hold them in a nice position, toes up, in a 90-degree position. If you can't achieve 90 and your splints are set at 90, they'll never be comfortable. So that's the first thing. If your ankles or your child's ankles or children's ankles have got tighter during lockdown and you think the splints no longer fit, contact your physio team. And they will say, oh, we're not open, we're not doing, but many orthotic services are still working. They are considered to be one of the more urgent services. And if we are really going to get tight ankles, then the long-term problems of those are great. And the physio is just going to have more work to do at trying to bring you back to a good 90-degree position. So ultimately, being able to get your feet to 90 degrees is really, really important. Many of you will argue, oh yes, but my child walks on his toes, it's not an issue. You said yourself you wouldn't stop children walking on their toes. We don't. Walking on their toes is a perfectly usual problem that we have in DMD. And the boys do it when they're tired, when they're weak, when they've been walking too far. And mechanically, yes, it is easier at times to walk on your toes. But we have always also said it is equally important to be able to stand still with your heels down. Being able to get your feet to 90 degrees makes it easier to get up from a chair, makes it easier to get up off the floor, is important for going up and down stairs, going up slopes, and all these things are easier if you can get your feet to at least 90 degrees. Doesn't matter if you walk on your toes. The two are not exclusive of each other. The boys walk on their toes, we're not going to stop them. They need to. But being able to stand with your heels down, to be able to continue to get your foot into a 90-degree position is extremely important. And what's important is also that we can get our foot to a 90-degree position with our knee straight, not over straight. Some of the boys go into this strange over straight, particularly when they're standing, and their knee almost bends backwards to get their heel down. And that is not helpful either, because that's showing actually that there is tightness at the ankle, and the only way they can get their heel down is to over straighten at the back. So we want a straight knee, and an ankle to 90 is the ideal position. We don't splint knees and ankles together. We're not out to torture. I know that's what people think physio is to do. You may think that we're out to torture, but ultimately what we're trying to do is maintain the best possible position. Doesn't have to be the most uncomfortable position, but the best possible. When it comes to night splints, what we are looking for ideally is an unlined splint. Now, padding around bony parts is fine. Sometimes at the back of the heel is fine. But what we find with lined splints is they're sweatier than unlined splints, strangely enough. And they can get dirty and smelly and fungally and revolting. And I'm sure there's plenty of parents. And in fact, one young man came to us just before lockdown with his night splints, which will actually no, it's one of our young men who's come to us since lockdown who was struggling, brought his night splints to check they fit, which they did. But he himself took them out of the bag and said, they're really smelly. And admittedly, they were really smelly. You can clean them down with disinfectant, but obviously if they're lined, you then have to stick them somewhere like an airing cupboard to make sure they've dried out pretty quickly. So there's no point in doing that. The beauty of these things is you can wear a sock or stockinette, or if socks are too hot, cut some toes out of some old socks so that you've got at least some fresh air to your toes. And ideally, all night splints, we always ask for unlined night splints because they're much better. Now, next thing about the splints is the straps. This is neoprene. Good old-fashioned mummies and daddies who remember will remember that orthotic companies always had to use the most expensive materials. And what was the most expensive materials? sheepskin and leather. Now, rare is the company that uses sheepskin and leather these days, unless you're going to pay a fortune. So we have neoprene, which again is sweaty, and we do have children who are allergic to neoprene. So we need to be careful with these straps. If you can find an orthotic company that will make you good old-fashioned leather straps, they are still the best straps. The strap over the ankle should be padded. This one has sheepskin, and actually looking at it, it may even be real sheepskin, rare as that is. And real sheepskin, people say, oh, but real sheepskin's hot. Real sheepskin is not hot. It actually allows for air circulation. So although you have a sheepskin jacket in the winter, one of the things that makes sheepskin warm is the fact that it maintains the air circulating around your body instead of letting it escape. So it's not boiling, and it's a lovely strap. You should never, and I've seen it, and in fact the front strap of this is just a Velcro strap. And what is horrible about this is they're very often quite sharp at the edges. And Velcro straps, if you actually run your fingers down the edge of a strap across here, it's not the nicest thing in the world. And if some of the boys have got slightly puffy feet, or they end up a little bit puffy in the mornings, then they can dig. So you need to make sure that they've got nice straps. You don't like your straps, tell your orthotist you want something nicer, because if you're expecting your child to wear something that is bog standard horrible and they won't wear it, don't be surprised. I really think if we're going to bother to ask the boys to wear these all night, and ideally they will, then they should be comfortable and made of nice materials. Okay, two other features which you may have. One is this tiny, tiny little hole in the heel. Now, a lot of parents have not even noticed it. I have to say, it is not to let the sweat drip out, which is what so many parents think that it's for. It's actually so that you can see if the heel is right down. So if you can't see anything in that hole, it could be that the heel's right down. If you can't, if there's a gap, you will know, and the heel's not in the right place. And then the other thing you can have, which you can't really see here that well, is there are holes in the back here, and they are supposedly air holes. I'm not convinced that a few holes in the back here will make them a lot cooler, but some companies will put holes in the back to stop them being quite so sweaty. They can't put holes everywhere because it would stop them being so rigid. But that little hole in the heel is quite useful. As I say, not just to drip out the sweat, although there is plenty of times we have picked up splints after taking them off the boys if they've been in hospital and the sweat does drip out. That's usually when we've had them post-surgery. So, nice material here at the front on the top strap. Ideally leather, but as I say, neoprene is not particularly nice, and some children are allergic to it. Nice straps, nice and comfortable, and you're more likely to wear them. If you had horrible straps on your shoes, or like me, you hate shoes with toe posts unless they've got those nice, fat, soft, squishy bits around the toe post, you're not going to wear them if they're uncomfortable. I hate those toe posts that really dig in your feet. So why would I make a child wear something uncomfortable if I'm not going to wear something uncomfortable? So that's the first thing. Now, if during lockdown you have grown, and one of the problems with your splints is you're starting to get red marks over those two bones that stick out either side of your ankle. That is the most common place to get marks. You can get them at what they call the fifth Meth-Head, which is the bone at the side of the foot. If you feel down from your little toe towards your heel, on the outside of your foot, you'll come across a bump. That can also get a bit red. It's really, really important, if you are getting red marks, to get the pressure off those red marks. So you get a nice little piece of felt, or you get some cotton padding, or you find something useful at home and you shove it in where it's making a mark, you will make the mark worse. Because if you think about it, if your bone is pressing against the plastic and you stick an extra bit of padding in there, you're just going to make the mark worse. You've made it tighter, not better. So if you've got a red mark over a bony bit, and those bony bits at the side of your ankles are called malleoli, not that you wanted to know that, but that's a nice little bit of, there's a good Scrabble word for you if you've been playing Scrabble during lockdown. I must admit, I've been collecting words for Scrabble during lockdown. Okay, so get your felt or whatever and make a little circle. You could get corn pads. I'll tell you what you can get. You can get makeup remover pads. They're quite, but make sure you haven't got the scratchy side up. The one that you're meant to exfoliate with. You know what I mean, mothers. Your fathers are busy wondering what on earth we're talking about. And make a little circular bit like that so that the bone that's getting red is in there, not padded. Stick that inside, and then you've taken the pressure off by padding around the place where the pressure is. So if you've got pressure, do not pad over the pressure. Either make a circle or pad above and below to push the bone away from the plastic. Never pad over a bone, you'll make it worse. Okay, I want to talk about, I've got another one here, these things. Insoles and heel cups. Insoles for flat feet are a waste of time. There is no point in, if you have a flat foot, shoving something underneath it, because all you're doing is stretching the arch of the foot more. So a pain-free flat foot does not need management. That's the first thing. So if somebody's trying to con you into getting some very smart insoles or gel insoles, I love these. They're such a waste of time, but never mind. They don't wibble well. To shove an arch in a flat foot is not in the long term useful. If the foot is rolling inwards, or if the foot is rolling outwards, then the problem is more often than not the heel, not the arch in the foot. So the thing that rolls in and out is nothing to do with your ankle. Your ankle just moves up and down. The thing that rolls in and out is your heel. Your heel is a separate joint from your ankle. Your ankle moves your foot up and down. Below your ankle joint, there is what is called the subtalar joint. And the subtalar joint is your heel, and that allows your foot to rock in and out. And that is what is rolling if your foot's twisting in or twisting out. And then you need a heel cup. And a heel cup is deeper than an insole because an insole doesn't have this back section. The heel cup should control the position of the heel. But what you must have on the bottom of the heel cup is a little step. And that step will either roll your heel back from the middle, if you're rolling inwards or outwards, there's a step, whichever way it works, to bring your heel back into that middle position to stop it rolling in or out. So if, like this, which you probably can't see, you have no little step, then that is not going to do the job. A heel cup must always have this little step to stop the heel rolling in or out. And it should be small enough to go into the child's normal size shoe. You should not need a bigger shoe for a heel cup. But, and this is important because parents are often not told this, if you have a shoe that already has an insole, that already has a bit of arch support, that already is a little bit contoured, there's no good putting this on top because it'll rock around on everything that's already in there. So you need to take out the existing insole. Problem, I think it's Nike, but it may not be. The more expensive trainers normally have those insoles glued in. The cheaper trainers are easier to take the insole out, put in one of those flat things that you buy to stop your feet smelling, and put that in on top. But that will not work if you've already got a contoured insole inside the shoe. And if it won't come out, don't wreck your trainers. Please don't. Get your 90 quid Nikes or your 120 quid whatevers and try and rip the insole out. You'll wreck your shoes. Go and get a cheaper pair that you can get the insole out of them. Okay, so that's insoles. Now, do we use insoles at all? Yes, for painful feet. If you are getting painful flat feet, or if you just get painful feet anyway because they got hot and bothered, then gel insoles might be a nice addition just to stop pain, but they won't do very much for the shape of your foot, and they're not going to change your walking, but they can help with painful feet. Okay, any questions about that so far?
We do. So
Okay.
we have from, unfortunately, I'm not too sure who it is because they're just down as their Samsung phone. But they said, hello, Marion, thank you again for all this wonderful information. They've got a question. So the splint that they have been given has Velcro straps on the toes, ankles and calf. There's no neoprene or anything nice. They mark the feet and legs and it's uncomfortable. So they're worrying that there's no give. So they feel that
if mum has a craft box, or if sister has a craft box and has some felt, some ordinary felt, then you could line the straps with just ordinary felt. You may be able to find something that you could use for padding at home and pad if you have a little bit of sheepskin that you've got from somewhere, even if it's synthetic sheepskin. If you've got a coat waiting to go in the charity box that has sheepskin cuffs or a sheepskin bit round the hood, you may be able to line it with that. Take it out the charity bag. Sorry, charity, whichever charity you were giving it to. Take it off the hood or the bits. You may find that a winter coat that you're no longer wearing, again, was going to go in the charity bag, often has nice wodgy padding, because sometimes winter coats are nice and thick, quilted coats. You may be able to make it into short sleeves, chop a bit off the hem and make it into a jacket, and then use that to line the straps. So there are DIY, you know, this is Blue Peter Land stuff. So those of us who were born in Blue Peter Land, who, you know, here's one we made earlier. Get out your rag bag, because I've got an amazing rag bag. And in fact, you can't see it, but this room is now my mask factory. And I've got all my bits for making all my masks, my little masks. I've got a mask factory going in here. I could make a fortune. However, get your rag bag out, get those horrible straps like this lined. Not every set of night splints has toe straps. Normally, they're usually for feet that tend to turn in a bit. Not all of them are necessary. Some of them will detach, so you don't have to wear them. It really depends on the child's foot. But if the foot tends to be what I would call a banana foot, yes, you do need a toe strap. But as I say, you're just going to have to go into the rag bag or send the children on a bit of a treasure hunt around the house and see what they can find to line the straps.
Okay, thank you. I know that I think when you're given a bit of equipment by a professional, you just, you know, I've always presumed, you know, I shouldn't tamper with it, but that's really good to hear from the top expert. That's really good.
It's fine to say not to tamper with it, but I think we have got to a stage now, as I say, I remember when we used to work with the John Florence and everything was top class leather. I mean, orthotists used to have the most beautiful watch straps because they always had them from the factory, but we used to get top class leather and everything was sheepskin and it was beautiful. And the government just don't care anymore. I mean, that was a government directive. It had to be expensive stuff. But I think, you know, with cutbacks and things, we are getting something. And as I say, you really cannot expect children to sleep or spend time in something that's not comfortable. It's not acceptable. We wouldn't do it. Why should they?
No, totally agree. The parent that was talking about the previous question said that they feel there's no give to the boots, so they feel that he must lose some circulation in the upper layers of his skin. There's a red band on his skin every time.
Shouldn't do, but then they do need padding. And also you don't have to tie them extremely tight as long as the foot is held in quite a nice position. The only strap that should be reasonable is the ankle strap. And what we found sometimes is they make them so deep that the ankle strap actually isn't holding the foot at all because there's too big a gap and the foot's rolling around inside. So that needs to be, if this section here around the heel is too deep, that strap is just sitting over the plastic and the foot's rolling around. But we need to complain, parents. It's, you know, if the company are going to bother to make them, particularly if they're not off the shelf, our ideal is not off the shelf, because children are not off the shelf. They don't come in bog standard sizes, even though shoe sizes are bog standard. Feet are not bog standard. And again, the boys may not have the same lumps and bumps and twists and turns. And it seems reasonable they're not made off the shelf and they fit and they're comfortable.
Okay. Also, that was actually Beth that asked that question. She also said, I guess the direct question was, would you ask for a replacement one? I'm guessing that they're your first ones, Beth, for Hank, and also because they're fairly newly diagnosed, and also she's only got one splint. Does he need two, really, Marion?
It would be very rare to ever wear one because that's so asymmetrical. Even if one foot is tighter than the other, it's not going to improve the situation. You know, when we are serially casting feet, we will do two even if one is not tight, because you can't expect the child to stand or function in one plaster. It makes them very asymmetrical. So we would rather plaster the good foot along with the tighter foot than make the child asymmetrical. And one splint is, what are they supposed to do? Use the same one on the alternating feet? I mean, I have never in 30 years come across a child being given one splint. The big problem we have at the moment, where parents might say, would you ask for a replacement, is it's going to be impossible to find a service that is open. This is what a lot of parents are complaining about. Either to get to the physio or to get to the orthotist is impossible. And the queue is almost going to be the same as the hairdresser, but not quite, if there's any hairdressers out there. Because I am going to be first in that hairdresser's queue. But I think to ask for a replacement is not unreasonable, but you won't get one for a while, so you're going to have to doctor it for now.
Okay.
But get the other one.
Just so you know, I'm going to be first in there because I've made an absolute hash of this.
I love the colour. The colour's amazing.
This is my prison look.
Yeah, well, mine is driving me potty. All these bits that I can do.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
I did ask
Marion,
one of the girls to plait it. She said it was too
that's
short.
a good idea. You could start dreadlocks, Marion. I'm just going to take Beth off mute because I think that she really wants us to get really good clarity on this, if that's okay. So here's Beth.
Yeah.
Oh, Marion, thank you so much for this. This is so helpful. I don't know why we were given one splint either. We were told to, so he's 5, we were told to put it on for half an hour on each foot. So do half hour with him sat down, and then after that half hour, change it over onto the other leg and do another half hour.
That's so very, very worrying. I don't know where your service is, and to be honest, I don't think I want to, because nobody should have splints that will fit both feet. Even off the shelf splint center that's not only giving them out to everybody, and this actually belongs to them, and the child hated them so much the mum couldn't wait to leave them with us, but they are researching them to say, well, if you wear these you won't need to do stretchers. That's because stretchers don't work if they're not done properly. However, That's besides the point. We're coming on to those in a minute. But those are not, Beth, those are not night splints. He should have proper night splints because he should be wearing them for more than half an hour. Half an hour is as effective as going up, down, now the other toenail. I'm not convinced. So I would also speak to your physio and say, excuse me, for what's going on. Because even in the APCP guidelines, that's the Association of Chartered Pediatric Physiotherapists, if you get hold of their guidelines, which are free online, then it will say that night splints are to be worn at night, not for half an hour during the day, which is probably a waste of time.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you. That's oh gosh. All right, but I will sort it. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So I'm in exactly the same situation as Beth with that. I've been given those for Samson to wear through the night, and he obviously
stretching
doesn't wear them.
splints. No. Kids will not wear stretching splints. There's absolutely no way. We're not, as I say, this is not the business of torture. You know, when you go to bed at night, you're supposed to relax. You're supposed to go to sleep. You're not supposed to have somebody trying to pull your tendons off, push your foot up to your nose. It's all about resting in a good position. The whole issue with nighttime splints is in bed at night. If you are sitting on a settee right now and your feet are not on the floor, they will hang down. If you are lying in bed, your natural position is foot down. If you have a duvet, even something as light as a duvet, it will pull your foot down. That is the position. We do not want the foot to spend 8, 10, 12 hours a night hanging down. All a night splint is to do is to keep it at a 90-degree position for as long as possible during the night. We're not looking to stretch. It is a night resting splint. Resting, not stretching. Stretches are for the day, and everybody has heard me say this a million times. Stretches are active, not passive. We're not stretching passively. It has no long-term benefit, which is why it has been abandoned by so many top authorities. People saying stretches don't work. No, passive stretches don't work. So to sit there for half an hour with a splint on, take it off and your foot's hanging down again, you've gained nothing. These are night resting splints.
Okay.
Any more questions?
There is. So Anisha joined us a little bit late, just a couple of minutes later, and missed the discussion about the shoes. So would you mind just clarifying, please, Marion? So the question was, they've always struggled to buy shoes that can be worn with CAFOs and day splints. We end up buying cheap light trainers that have Velcro openings and are extremely massive for him. What do you advise?
CAFOs. What was the question? Because I can understand trainers for CAFOs, but not trainers for day splints. Was it specifically trainers for CAFOs? Because no boy with Duchenne should be wearing this sort of thing during the day.
Anisha, you happy to take you off?
CAFOs are a different matter. I have a CAFO here.
Oh, I think, Anisha, if you'd like to, if you're happy for me to take you off mute, please do. Otherwise, please do pop the question in the chat.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Sorry. So he wears CAFOs for about 20 minutes to half an hour a day.
No, that can't be CAFOs. These are CAFOs.
Yes, to walk in.
Okay.
To do therapy walking. Sorry, the baby's crying. And he wears day splints as well, but for day splints, because obviously he's wearing them to school and back and everywhere else, he needs shoes for them as well. And I can't seem to find shoes that will actually fit him correctly.
Have the day splints got a long foot? So that the foot comes all the way past the end of the toes?
Yes.
Okay, let me go back on mute because then I'll answer that. Day splints for boys who are non-ambulant. Day splints, and we do recommend our boys who can't wear night splints to wear day splints because they prefer to wear them for school and wear them at night. You do not need to have clown feet. A day splint can have a short foot. Unless there is quite marked foot deformity, you do not need the front section of the foot. That will be held by the shoe. A day splint, we get separate day and night splints. If our boys are wearing day splints, it has a short foot like this, and if they have night splints, it has a long foot. So a day splint that they wear for school inside a shoe does not need to be full foot. It's cut off mid-foot to make shoe wearing easier. Our day splints are short feet, our night splints are long feet. So I hope that answers the question for a lot of people. Unless you have a really, really twisted foot. Now, if you have a really twisted foot, this is really not going to hold it anyway, because you're going to twist inside there. So that's something else to think about. Really, really twisted feet don't do well in day splints, because you're going to rub at least somewhere on the inside of the plastic, and that's a big problem. But a nice day foot, if your young man is wearing CAFOs to do some walking and day splints, then he doesn't need a long foot on his day splints. Does that answer some questions? I'm now going to get a barrage of complaints. However, that's how it is. Find yourself a decent orthotic company that understand where we should be going. We don't need the kids in clown splints. 1.5 sizes should be big enough to fit over something like that. For the daytime, you don't need that end of the splint.
Thanks, Marion. Just to clarify, so night splints are ones that you actually have casted, do you? They're the ones that get casted?
We have day splints as well. Day splints should be cast. So if you think about it, and some of our kids have day and night because that's what they want to wear. If they've had surgery, they should be wearing day and night, at least for 3 months. Then one cast is used for both splints, and all they do is make a short foot on the day splints. But if our boys have had TA release and they're going to go into CAFOs, they wear day and night splints, many of them. Either they wear their CAFOs all day, or they get CAFOs and night splints and day splints. Some of them will only choose to wear the day splints and the CAFOs, that's fine. But a night splints need a full foot, day splints, short foot.
Okay. We've got a question from Katie. Hi, Katie. Sorry, I missed your question. So I'm really happy to take you off mute if you want to chat any further. So Katie says her son's splints are leaving marks across the front of his ankle, and he is developing a rash on the back of his calf. She's got an appointment with orthotics next week to hopefully have some new ones casted. She's hoping the marks are due to being too small, and just to let you know, his feet, no, that's Anisha, sorry, his feet have started to turn. That's Anisha's son.
One of the things about marks at the front of the foot is very often if the boys do not get to 90 degrees, or if the splint is set a little bit past 90 and the boys are pushing their foot downwards because they're not held well by the strap and held comfortably, if you're constantly pushing your foot down, your foot will arch at the front and that will make the splint rub. But you do need a good fit to the splints. Now, if they're really causing problems with rubbing over the front, you can have the straps moved to just above and just below the ankle joint to make it more comfortable and stop that rubbing across the front of the foot. So again, the orthotists need to be a little bit flexible about where they put the straps. Ideally, it would be across the ankle, but if that's not working, there's nothing to stop it going a little bit above and a little bit below, and having 2 straps rather than the one across the front. So again, the orthotists need to be a little bit flexible and use a little bit of imagination as to what's going to work best for each child.
Okay. Is that
tight ankles can cause problems.
Okay. Katie, does that answer your question? Or if you want to add anything, just hands up and I can unmute you. Mute you.
The rash at the back of the calf is just sweatiness, whether they're lined or unlined, ideally a cotton sock inside. So if they wear cotton socks inside or stockinette, ask the orthotist, when the new ones are made, ask the orthotist to give you a spare piece of the stockinette that they put under when they're casting. So those of you who have them cast individually, you will have stockinette put on. Ask for some spare lengths of that to wear inside the splints.
Because he only has, on his splints, he only has 2 straps. So he has one across the top and then the one across the ankle. Should he have another one then at the bottom across the toes?
Not everybody has toe straps. Not everybody has toe straps.
Okay.
But if he's pulling out and that's what's causing the rubbing across the front of his ankle, then he may need a toe strap. And what might be better is if the strap is not actually across the ankle, but slightly higher up, just above the ankle here, and then a toe strap as well. And that might stop the rubbing across the ankle. But the rash, then he needs the lining stuff, the stockinette they put on when they make the cast. Ask for some spare of that to wear under the splint to try and stop that rash.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Marion. I think we're up to date with the questions, unless anyone wants to quickly put their hand up and ask one before we move on to the next bit. Claire, have you got any questions, or are you okay? Yeah, Nisha? Yeah, cool, okay. Thanks, Marion.
Okay, CCDs, contracture control devices. Okay, I'm not a great fan, partly because this thing is vicious, and if you're not careful, it'll take your hands off. I'm really scared of this thing. I am not kidding you. You let go, and if you just unclip it, it sort of, like that. So it could actually take a finger off. These are sprung so that they can be set at different angles, so they can actually sort of push you up as far as that. And the idea is that they stretch you. There is a right and a left in them. I don't know if they're tailor-made individually, because if they were, this one was made for a Yeti. It is a ratchet system. I tell you, it scares the life out of me. And the theory is that if you wear this, you won't need stretching and you won't need night splints, but you need to sit in them for 2 hours is the advice given. Now, those of you who know me, and I'll always give you an explanation for what I say. I don't say things for no reason. I do not like the idea of any boy sitting still for 2 hours. It's encouraging them, firstly, to sit still, which I don't like. I believe children are moving creatures and that we shouldn't be encouraging them not to move for 2 hours. I also believe that the likelihood of them sitting with a good posture for 2 hours is awful because, again, anybody's ever heard me at Action Duchenne, I can't get parents to sit still for 2 minutes. You wiggle and you cross your legs and you uncross your legs. And that might be because you always give us crap chairs at Action Duchenne. That might be the point. But let's get real. I have said to audiences over and over again, okay, sit still, 10 minutes minimum. And within 2 minutes, everybody's moved somewhere. So it is not normal to sit completely still. So you sit with this thing on, you're playing your Xbox, you're watching TV, you're doing whatever. I don't like sitting still for 2 hours. The other thing is, what I have found, this is most effective actually when you stand in it. You will get a much better stretch when you stand in it because your body weight will help stretch your ankle down. So what we have found is if somebody does give you CCDs, and we don't give them out, but if somebody does give you a CCD, you're probably better off standing with it on. You'll get a better stretch than sitting with it on, because all you have to do is bend your knee and you take the stretch off. So that's easy peasy. Shouldn't be sitting down. Half an hour is fine. And the other splints that you get look much more like this, and they have 2 straps at the side and they're flexible here, and you pull the strap up and you sit in that, and that's the sort of thing that Beth has her little boy in, and I think, Lynette, you have your young man in it. But as a night splint, absolutely not. We really, really do not recommend night stretching splints. It's not acceptable. That truly is torture. And as I say, these CCDs, I am not convinced. I know there is a centre that are doing research of CCDs versus night splints. I am sure in 2 or 3 years' time we'll hear the results. But my honest feeling is 2 or 3 years won't tell us the long-term outcome. I will tell you now what I have said before, and that is that a colleague of mine did some research into night splints, and the boys who wore their night splints ended up with better foot posture. Simple as that. Wear your night splints, and not only will you have better range of movement while you're ambulant, but you will have nicer feet when you're non-ambulant. So that's all I can say. Next piece of equipment, unless there's some more questions.
No, we're good for questions. Yeah.
Okay, the next place I am going in terms of splints are these things, gaiters. And we have just put a young man into gaiters, not flowery ones. All right, I agree. These are the only ones I had at home. These are flowery ones, and I'm not giving out to the boys, but that is sexist, and there might be boys out there who would prefer flowery ones, so you never know. Gaiters, cricket pads, whatever you want to call them, canvas with metal bars. We do have some boys who've been given them by their local service to sit with straight legs, stretch their knees, sit them in a nice position. I am not objecting to that. I am not doing it, but I don't think that's an awful thing to do. I would rather they sat in gaiters than did active, passive hamstring stretches, which I don't like at all. So we do have some boys who have gaiters. What I am not convinced about is there are a few children who are given gaiters to sleep at night in bed as well as night splints. Now, I honestly think that it must be really hard to sleep with your knee straight and your foot stuck up in the air. It must be hard to roll over, and it must be hard not to sort of cramp up or get stiff in the middle of the night. So if your physio has suggested gaiters and foot splints, I would suggest you only wear one leg at a time. I don't think to have both legs splinted that much in bed at night is going to make for a good night's sleep. So that there are people who will use gaiters to stretch knees. Knees are not our biggest problem in Duchenne, not in an ambulant child. It is extremely rare to get a knee flexion contracture, a tight knee in an ambulant boy. This is really a problem with non-ambulant. We will get tight hips and we will get tight ankles in ambulant children, but not knees. We use these gaiters for the boys who are falling. So the boys who are getting bigger, who are finding either they've had a growth spurt, it can be anywhere between 7 years old and 14 years old. They're falling a lot, they're losing confidence in walking, they're finding things more difficult. We use gaiters to give them the confidence in their knees, and we did exactly that this week. We had a young man in, he was falling, he was losing confidence in walking because he never knew when his knees were going to buckle. One of the things about Duchenne is the boys don't fall splat forwards. They don't often trip. They're just suddenly going along and whoosh, their knees have gone and down they go. And this is because the quadriceps muscle, the muscle that keeps the knees straight, fatigues, it suddenly sort of says, whoops, that's it, had enough, point, and down you go. And it's scary, it's not comfortable, and it gets to the point where not only do the boys not want to fall, but they worry about being able to get up again. And in that situation, you can understand the boys losing confidence in their ability to walk. And very often they can walk, they still have the muscles, but it becomes more scary than it is difficult. And at that point, we will offer them gaiters, even if it's only for standing, because it takes away the buckling of the knees. And what you do is, it should have no more than 3 metal bars. No metal bar goes over the knee. 2 metal bars go around the sides of the knees. The 3rd metal bar goes behind the knee so that there's nothing, no metal stuck over the kneecap. What you will find is that some gaiters have metal bars and then a plastic bar in between, and then that all velcros around as tight as possible to keep the knee straight, and the boys can stand in them. We've had boys who've walked in them. Some of the boys stand in them inside standing frames. It shouldn't be necessary in a good standing frame, but it's not unheard of. But the gaiters are only really used when the boys are struggling with walking from our unit. And it's a very nice interim measure, and it will tell the boys whether they want to continue standing and if they want to continue walking. When the boys are struggling, there are 3 choices. You keep going until you stop walking. You just stand, but you don't walk, or you can go to CAFOs and continue to walk in CAFOs. The choice is the boys. They're the ones that have to do it. I wouldn't force anybody into any situation. It has to be their decision. There is no negative about deciding you no longer want to walk. This is a really, really hard time for parents. That point at which the boys no longer want to walk, whether they're scared, whether it's too difficult, whether being in an electric wheelchair is so much easier. It has to really be the boy's decision, because as a parent, you can say, no, we'd like you to continue. As a physio, we can say, and if the boys aren't motivated to continue, we will never really be successful at trying it. So it's a combination of everybody talking together to see what the boys want. And no parent should ever feel that they have somehow let anybody down by agreeing to that decision of stopping walking. Because very often it is the right decision. It's not the preferred decision. It's incredibly hard. But we're not the ones who are doing the falling. We're not the ones that are scared. We're not the ones who are putting in a ton of effort and getting no return. So it's hard. We know it's coming at some point, not at the same time, anywhere between 6, 16 and beyond. But if it works and it's right for that child, standing may be right, standing may not be right. It's a family decision, but the boys have to agree to it. And at that point, I'm going to take a big deep breath, as so many parents are, and say, are there any questions?
Yes. So on the subject of gaiters, the question is, would you encourage gaiters to non-ambulant boys who get tight at the knees, regardless of stretches, 3 times a day, plus standing chair, plus CAFOs?
We don't, only because we make what we call soft cast knee splints, which are individually tailored knee splints. These have metal bars. If your son's knees are already bent, these are straight. This is never going to fit a child with bent knees. It can't. The metal bars are straight. We make soft cast knees individually. A pair of soft cast knees takes 20 minutes in clinic, no more. And we have many children who come in, bent knees, want to keep them as straight as possible. Parents want to keep them as straight as possible. And yes, we will make them in clinic and they walk out with them. We can make them in colors. They don't have to be boring. We can make them in 2 different colors. It's really not important. We do serial casting in everything from Nike to Arsenal to Minions, you name it, we've done it. So we can make these splints for a night in bed. Soft cast is not strong enough to stand in standing frames, but you can use gaiters inside standing frames. The problem with gaiters inside standing frames is that if the knees aren't straight, they will never be comfortable. They're always going to dig in somewhere. So that really, to put gaiters in a standing frame, always suggests to me that the standing frame needs to be better or better adapted to the child. I think one of the troubles with equipment and bog standard equipment is we try and fit the child to the equipment instead of fitting the equipment to the child. And that's where we tend to fall apart. And I think we've got to be a little bit more flexible in our thinking, a little bit more flexible in our equipment. It always reminds me of one of the most wonderful sets of OTs I used to work with, Rona and Naomi. And Naomi never went anywhere without an electric carving knife. Now, I know you can't do that these days, but she did. She would get stopped by the police now, but that's what she always had, a kit with an electric carving knife and a block of foam. And if it didn't fit, you would end up with foam in all sorts of different places, but it would fit. And we have to stop fitting children to equipment and fit equipment to children. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
You're not sure? We were talking about gaiters inside standing frames.
Yeah. Is that okay for you, Anisha? Anisha, do you want to ask any more questions about that?
Oh gosh, I don't know how to do this.
You're off mute now. You're
Oh, sorry.
okay.
Yes, yeah, it really does make sense. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Brilliant.
No problem.
Okay. So no more questions so far.
Okay, let's move on to CAFOs. If boys, families decide that they want to continue walking, and we do still have some, I think with steroids, it's less and less. I think very often boys who are already struggling at secondary school do not want to continue. I think generally parents feel it's easier to make decisions for children and boys who are at primary school, but much, much harder to make decisions, or let's say persuade boys who are at secondary school as opposed to impose on boys who are at secondary school. But I think it is harder. I think boys at secondary school, if they want to stand, they usually want to stand at home. They do not want to stand in school. We have the occasional young man who wants to standing wheelchair because they can see the benefits of being able to speak to people face to face and stand up and stay straight, but it's a rare young man who wants to do that. Many of our boys are still walking into teenage anyway, and by 14, 15, 16, the benefits of continuing are not always there. But if, for whatever reason, and we do still have boys who want to go into CAFOs, be it for standing, be it for walking, this is what we are talking about. Now, excuse me, this is a CAFO I have at home, and it's not actually a Duchenne CAFO. And I know that sounds crazy, but we very specifically have Duchenne CAFOs and SMA CAFOs. This is actually an SMA CAFO, and you know that because it's only got one bar. It doesn't have two bars. Now, Duchenne CAFOs always have two bars going up the sides with joints. Now, the most important thing about CAFOs is it has knee joints, and you can bend the knee to sit down. So you can actually spend all day in CAFOs, and we have had boys who literally put them on in the morning, lock the knees when they want to stand up, and up they come. If you have a boy who is keen to continue, to be perfectly honest, one of the best things that you can get is a wheelchair that goes up in height, because one of the easiest ways to stand up is to put the chair up higher and stand up from a higher chair. But they do bend at the knees, and as I say, in Duchenne CAFOs for boys with Duchenne, they will have two bars at the knee, and some of them will have the bar across the front, the quick release knee locks, and they bend. Okay, so you have a knee section, and our knee sections are always plastic. We don't use leather knee sections, and the reason that we're not keen on leather is the pressure on the kneecap itself is great in leather. The pressure on the plastic section is below the kneecap. It's not on the kneecap. It sort of cups under the kneecap to give a nicer support to the knee. It doesn't push over the knee itself. So we have plastic sections. The other thing about leather is it can stretch if the boys are really putting a lot of weight through that knee. So we like the plastic section. Now at the back, at the top at the back, on this section, you have a built-in seat. So this is sticking out at the back, and this is a built-in seat. And actually your bum bones, and you have bum bones, you may not be able to find your bum bones, but they're there. Your bum bones are supposed to sit on this seat, and that's what helps you stay upright. So you have a little seat. These are called ischial weight bearing, because the technical term for your bum bones are your ischium, and they sit on this thing at the back. Now you've got to be careful, because if it comes too far around, you can get nipped, which we don't want. The outside is always higher, so you have to be careful if they're not to put them on the wrong leg, because if you get the inside higher, again, you'll get nasty nips. And the other thing about them is they do always have short feet. We don't have CAFOs with long feet because it makes weight transfer easier if the boys want to walk in them. So that they have a short foot, they don't have a long foot. And that allows for bend in the foot to allow walking. And some of the boys walk extremely well. We've had boys who walked in them 6-7 years. We've also had boys who walked in them for 6 months and given up, and that's perfectly acceptable too, because at least you can say, well, he gave it a go. I do not decry any boy who gives it a go and says, no, not for me. But you would usually try the gaiters first, because by then they've decided whether they want to give the CAFOs a go. So we don't usually go straight to CAFOs. Now, the other thing about CAFOs is the foot needs to come virtually to 90 degrees. And if they don't, we have two options. And this is where very often when the families change their mind. Very often we will serially cast the feet and bring them up to 90 to put them into their CAFOs. So what happens is they come into the hospital, the orthotists will take the casts of the whole leg. We will then put them into serial casting and cast them until the CAFOs are made, by which time their foot's in a good position and they can get the CAFOs. In some cases, and it is rare, but we have done it and we do still have boys who want it, they will have foot surgery to get into CAFOs. It's not the choice for every child. And we have a small problem at Great Ormond Street. To have an anaesthetic, you have to have a cardiac MRI, because you cannot have an anaesthetic until you've had your heart function checked out completely, which everybody would understand. The problem is the boys have to keep still in the MRI, and they have to agree to keep still in the MRI. We can't give them an anaesthetic to have a cardiac MRI, because they can't have an anaesthetic until they've had a cardiac MRI. So it all gets a little bit circular. So if we're going to go to surgery, the boys have to keep still for the cardiac MRI before they go to surgery. Now, the surgery is extremely small. It's not big surgery. It doesn't take a long time. And the boys do not go into plaster after they've had this foot surgery. They literally have the CAFOs and the night splints made before surgery. We work on the basis that surgery will bring them to 90 degrees. So the foot of the CAFO and the night splints are set to 90. The boys go to theatre with the night splints, and they come back after surgery and lots of padding and bandages and night splints. No plaster at all. It is a tiny operation. We sent one boy home and the physio rang up and said, why didn't you do the operation? Because she missed the scar. It is literally because the tendon has a very, very tiny blood supply. Tendons are not very bloody. It's not like skin and other bits that bleed a lot. Tendons themselves do not have a big blood supply. Literally, the surgeon goes a tiny little hole in the skin, locates the tendon, slices it and comes out again. So you have one tiny, tiny little hole. The tendon is completely cut. It does mend, and you don't have a foot flopping around. Don't think that the foot's suddenly all floppy and like jelly and hanging down. It's not. It goes in the night splint. Yes, obviously, it's not 100% comfortable, and you don't want to go in the next day and start doing stretches. But generally, what happens is the day after surgery, those nasty physio ladies come in with the CAFOs. They take off all the bandages and the night splints, put the CAFOs on, and up they stand the day after surgery. So the shocked faces, you can put them away. It's not awful. They do that twice the first day, twice the second day, and then they go home. So it's actually much smaller than you think. And the other thing is, once the boys have had that surgery, it's very rare that they get funny feet later on. That is probably the only surgery they'll need. It's highly unlikely when they get to 14, 15, 16 that their feet will have twisted. It's not impossible, but it's very rare, because we then insist they keep their night splints for when they're not wearing their CAFOs. And it's still done. It's not common. Not many of the boys opt for surgery. We will usually get away with serial casting. If it becomes a problem and the parents don't want surgery, it is possible to make CAFOs with feet that point down, but it will really depend on how tight their knees and hips are and whether we can get the boys balanced. So some of it will depend on what's going on up above. So there's a lot of variations. I know a lot of places think CAFOs are a waste of time. It's not for everybody. We're never ever saying anybody has to do it. It is an option we offer, and that's as far as it goes. The decision then is a family decision, a boy's decision, and we will agree to whatever that family wants to do. But we have it as an option. It's not compulsory. We're not there to judge, we're there to offer. If you don't want it, you don't want it. It's easy as that.
Marion, we had a couple of questions come in around that subject. Oh, wait.
I was just about to stop and say, any questions?
So we'll take Claire's first, and then we'll go back to you, Leslie, if that's okay. So Claire said, is there a weight limit for the boys? Matthew, her son, is 11 and very heavy and can only transfer, not walk any distance. He has never been offered anything other than night splints.
The biggest problem is if you've been off your feet a long time, it's not going to work. This has to be done within 6 months of losing the ability to walk. I think probably the child that we were asked to do it with, the longest they had been off their feet was about a year. And the only reason we agreed with this young man, they came from abroad, and he really did have good hips and knees. They had managed to keep his knees and hips from getting too contracted, and that we then put him into CAFOs. But normally we would never recommend CAFOs for a boy who's been off their feet more than 6 months. So if Matthew's been off his feet more than 6 months, we would say absolutely not. If he really wants to stand, then we would say a standing frame. But the weight of the boy is not the issue. We have had one of my favouriteest young men who went into CAFOs was 6'2". And yeah, I can see your eyebrows there, just about disappeared into your hair. He was 13 when he went into CAFOs. He was told by my predecessor that he'd never do it, to which he turned around to me, and of course I'm 5'2", so he towered over me, and he turned around to me and said, I promise I will, give me a chance and I'll do it. And we put him into CAFOs, and he stayed in them until he was 19. But his problem was that at 6'2", he was so scared of falling he wouldn't walk, because he said nobody would ever get him up off the floor. And he stayed in his CAFOs for, as I say, 6 years. So he wasn't light. You can imagine at 6'2", he wasn't light. The only difference with the bigger, heavier boys is this is no longer lightweight metal. This then becomes steel. So that the boys who are heavier will have to have steel metal sections. It makes the CAFOs heavier, but because they're heavier, that extra weight is not noticeable when they're standing up. They don't suddenly feel incredibly heavy when they're standing. If they're standing in their capos, the fact that the metal bars are steel doesn't make a difference. So weight is not the issue. It's how long they've been off their feet that would make a difference.
Thank you. Is that all clear, Claire? Yeah, great. Thank you. So from Leslie, hi Marion, thank you so much for your time this evening. I think Leslie's echoing all of our thoughts. It's incredibly interesting. So Leslie's son is nearly 13, and in a 6-minute walk test, he can manage between 400 and 440 meters. How far should he be walking daily to keep him active during lockdown each day, please?
Between 400 and 440 meters, but not all in 6 minutes. I think that's a pretty impressive 6-minute walk test, to be honest. That is around, for a 13-year-old, at least 2/3 of what you would expect. So that's probably at the pretty much not far off the lower end of normal for age. How much should he be doing? Well, let's get real. It's an hour's aerobic exercise every day at that sort of activity level. Nobody's asking him to do 6-minute walk tests. And I know, you can't fool me. There are parents who've built 6-minute walk test tracks in their garden. Beware. I do know that they're out there. It's a great test. We love the 6-minute walk test. And anybody who knows Great Ormond Street will know we have the most beautiful 6-minute walk test track. And it's all been laid out in the floor and it's amazing. But, you know, it's like swimming lengths. It's boring. Nobody's asking you to walk up and down and up and down and up and down. I'd much rather you did activity, you played, you did your aerobics, you did your ball work, you whatever. But I don't expect anybody to do 6 minutes. Now, beware, because I do know of parents who've set up 6-minute walk test tracks in the garden. I also know that there are parents who have coached boys in 6-minute walk test. But beware, because there are drug trials where there is a maximum. And if you do more than 400 meters, you can't get onto every drug trial. So do not coach your children. It doesn't always work. The issue is, I'd rather they were having fun than maybe big numbers. 430 meters is a fantastic 6-minute walk test. He should be doing minimum half an hour of aerobic exercise every day. Get out, get your basketball net up, play in the garden, do whatever. Don't mind if you want to do a 6-minute walk test once a week, or up and down the garden, or do a Major Tom 100 times around the garden. I suppose it depends on how big your garden is. Did you see the size of Major Tom's garden? He's got a mansion. It goes on forever. My sister did 10 times around her garden and was pooped. So I suppose it really depends on how big your garden is. In my garden, it's more a case of 10 times around the garden picking up poop, but that's besides the point. We do have a dog. Get out there, have fun, little bit warm, little bit breathless, little bit increased heart rate. Don't go mad, but enjoy your exercise, enjoy the sunshine.
Brilliant. And of course, the vitamin D on the arms.
Oh, fantastic. But don't get burnt. It's going to be warm this week.
Any more questions, guys? Leslie, just for the record, says she doesn't have a track. So maybe now's the time, Leslie, to start building.
You're going to have a 25-meter garden.
Yes. Eva, thank you for your question. Eva has asked you, Marion, are there any recommendations on what type of shoes to wear?
Yes, trainers. We love trainers. We don't necessarily insist on X million-pound Nikes with the zips at the back, or the automatic locks, or gold-plated, or anything like that. We always used to say bog standard C&A's, Mother Care, and they've all gone, these shops, but I'm sure Sports Direct and all the other places still do trainers. Ultimately, we want flexible, we want lightweight, I want to wear them, because I don't think any boy should have, firstly, orthopedic boots Piedro boots. Piedro boots are heavy. They're inflexible. They're unnecessary. Anything that makes you lift your leg up to step has got to be a negative in Duchenne. Trainers are undoubtedly the best shoes. There are no good trainers and bad trainers. There are just expensive trainers and not expensive trainers. As I say, if you need insoles, it's no point having the expensive ones where you can't get the insole out. Please do not wreck 90, 100, 120 pound trainers getting the insoles out. You're better off going and getting another pair of cheapy trainers and taking the insoles out. We are not talking sports trainers. Beware, there are trainers specifically for running. You do not want running trainers because running trainers have quite a lot of, what would you call it? You know, they really grip the ground. There's quite a lot of friction on a proper trainer. Now, they are bouncy, I agree, but they've got a very deep sole and they're not the easiest to walk in. You want just a normal sporty trainer, but not running trainers. They're not going to make you run faster. They're not going to make you go faster, but they're not the ideal. You don't want a very, very deep contoured jelly airflow, what's its sole. A normal sports style trainer, basketball style trainer. You don't need boots unless the children are really getting a lot of sprained ankles. You do not need boots. Now, some of the kids who have very wobbly hind feet, very wobbly ankles, may need a more solid trainer or even a trainer boot to come up higher, but they still shouldn't be inflexible. They still shouldn't have rigid soles. They still shouldn't be heavy. And that brings us on to the Trilok Splints. And I'm very sorry I didn't bring one with. You can go onto the internet and look at Trilok Splints. There are two makes that we know of. One we recommend, which is called Push Acqui. It's P-U-S-H-A-E-Q-U-I. And if some of the boys who are finding it a little bit harder, and I'm not talking about really struggling with walking, but a little bit harder, a twisting on the outside border of their feet, we are finding these Trilok Splints are really helping better than a plastic orthotic made splint. Now, there is another one called Bioskin. It's more complex. Trilok is exactly what it is. It has a neoprene medial section. So the middle part of the foot, the inside part of the foot, is held with a neoprene ankle section. And there are 3 straps to control the foot. It goes into your normal everyday trainers. You don't need bigger shoes for it. Very acceptable to the boys because it just looks like an ankle or a sports splint. Or if they really don't want to be seen in it, you could wear a pair of socks underneath and a sock on top. But they are very, very good for the boys whose feet are starting to twist. So they're walking on the outside border of their foot. They're a little bit tight in the tendon. They're finding it more uncomfortable. It is a lovely, lovely brace. It is not cheap. You can go onto the internet, but your orthotic team should be able to supply you with Trilok Splints, or speak to your physio. Trilok Splints. Really nice for some of the boys who are finding some difficulty walking because of twisting feet.
So there was a couple of questions about the boots. So just to clarify, so flat. So is flat the best? Flat and flexible, is that right? Because Katie said, and as well as Beth, high top trainers and high ankle boots. Katie uses GOX high top
trainers are absolutely fine as long as they're not rigid, as long as the boys feel that they can move in them. One of the problems that makes the boys fall more or fatigue more is inflexibility, having to lift your foot up higher to walk. If you have to virtually knee march your feet, it takes a lot more effort. Your feet are higher off the floor. You're putting more pressure on one leg when the other foot's off the floor. So yes, high tops are fine. Most boys won't let you tie them all the way up to the top anyway. You only tie them halfway. Even if you tie them at all, most high tops, they have the laces tucked in somewhere where you can't see them. So that high tops are absolutely fine as long as they're not tied too tight and they're not rigid. Absolutely. In fact, we used to recommend them. And for those of us of a certain age, which none of you probably are, we used to suggest desert boots. Yeah, you've forgotten about those, haven't you? Half these mothers are thinking, what on earth are desert boots? We used to love desert boots. They were great, really nice. And you always hid all your orthoses and all your bits and pieces, and they were very flat inside, never had any contouring. But as I say, be careful of the contouring. Sometimes it's a bit too much in these shoes, and again, if you need a heel cup, or particularly a heel cup, just make sure that you can get the insole out. So you may want to try wrecking them before you leave the shop. Don't let the assistants see you though.
I think it's very tough actually, Marion. I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody or some other people on here, but the stuff that we're told at our regular physio and orthotics meetings are blatantly not, well, mine are blatantly not right.
No.
I've been told.
Let's get it right, Lynette. What I'm saying,
Sorry.
They may say what I'm saying is not right. I'm just trying to bring 30 years of experience, 30 years of trying to provide the boys with what the boys want to wear, with what the boys will wear, and what is easiest for them to wear. I have watched a lot of boys. I have watched thousands of boys with Duchenne in 30 years walking. I have seen what works. I know they like trainers. I am not trying to make them different. I am trying to make them the same as their mates. I do not find boots. We have a few boys, a very few, like about 1%, for whom Piedro boots have been supplied, and the boys like wearing them and feel stable in them, but 99% wouldn't. And my honest feeling is, I'm not here to make life tough. I am here to make life easier, or to allow the boys to be boys, to be first and foremost boys, to be second, have Duchenne, to try and live as positive, as same life as everybody else as possible. I am not giving them orthopedic boots. I am not forcing them into things they don't want to do. That is not my job. My job is to work with them to get the best possible results. And if that means nice trainers, I want them in nice trainers.
But do you know what, Marion? That's all of those reasons is why I'd always listen to you over and above a community physio, for that precise reason. And
I think one of the big problems we have, Lynette, and this is not a criticism, although, you know, again, I have been doing this such a long time. In the community, you may see 2, 3, or 4 boys with Duchenne. You may have a school where all your Duchenne boys go. You may have a bit more experience. The vast majority of community physios caseload is cerebral palsy. In cerebral palsy, you do things a lot different. But many, many people do so much cerebral palsy, they transfer that information, that learning, those techniques to all their other kids, and it doesn't work for Duchenne. One of my big messages, and I'm not retiring until I get it through, is that neuromuscular is not the same. We are a group of conditions. People say, oh, you know, you've been doing neuromuscular too long, all this sort of thing. It is a different group of kids. They need to be treated not like cerebral palsy. Think of them within their own context instead of trying to extrapolate from somewhere else. Piedro boots, I don't treat cerebral palsy. I have, and I could, but I don't. Fine. That's what they need. They have a totally different problem. They have high tone. They have spasticity. They have a totally, totally different set of problems. You can't just take the answers to their problems and fit them to boys with Duchenne.
I think we've got some news, Marion. There's no way that you're going to be allowed to retire. Sorry.
No.
So let's move on from that anyway.
I absolutely nearly choked when you said that, Marion.
Yes,
I was like, I couldn't get
Dan's
myself
eyeballs were like,
I was like,
I had a
no.
mum say that to me too. Okay, I'm not retiring, but I may not keep working at GOS forever. They may kick me out. I am getting very old.
They're not
all
allowed.
all the Pilates is keeping you young. Beth said, and actually I know because Beth is under the same department as I am, and I think we've both received the wrong kind of info, not wrong, but different information. And
Different.
Best.
Let's call it different.
So Beth's been recommended that for Hank, the toes of the trainer should be off the floor, so the trainer is curved at the toe. Which is obviously
Another
hard to
cerebral
look for.
palsy trick. What a load of rubbish.
And
That's
at the high top, it's hard to get the right shoe. So high top curved toe, you're going to look like a
just
pixie.
take him into wherever you buy your shoes and fit him something that he likes to walk in. This curved at the front. I mean, this sounds to me like it's come straight from Aladdin. You know, those are those things where you see those Persian things with the little bells on top. The curved at the front again is back to cerebral palsy. Forget it. Get a normal pair of trainers.
Okay. There's some lovely ones in class at the minute, actually.
If he can walk in the shop in them, that's fine by me. If he can walk in the shop, he's got the right trainers.
Okay. So Eva's just clarifying, so it is flat that you're looking for, flat with no contours.
It doesn't have to be flat. I mean, flat. There is no flat. What I'm saying is I don't want the very thick running trainer soles. Now, you won't get running
like a Nike Air or something like that, which is like...
Well, teenage, you will get running trainers. When you go to places like Adidas or Nike, one of the proper stores, you will see everything set out in different styles. You've got your running, you've got your aerobic, you've got your joggers, you've got your you know, I have 3 different types of trainers. I have one for Zumba, one for netball, one for running. And the reason I have them is because they have different soles and they're different weights. So I have a dance pair, I have a pair. I cannot wear running trainers on the netball court. I would skid and go splat. And yes, I play netball, but of course at the moment we're not. And yes, I'm a midget, and yes, I'm geriatric, but I still play netball. But I have a different pair from my Zumba ones, which are more like dance trainers, which have a totally different sole. So it's just getting the right sole. It doesn't have to be flat. A lot of trainers have got a bit of a heel. They're very deceptive because sometimes they have that great big lump of plastic at the back, and yet they're not high heeled because the inside goes quite deep inside. The other thing you need to be wary of is ones that come up and then stop just at the back of the tendon and then rub on the tendon for some of the boys. So make sure there's plenty of room behind the tendon if they come up that bit higher. But as I say, when I'm talking about the sole, I just don't want a very, very contoured sole because they have too much grip. Running trainers have too much grip, and that's more a teenage thing. You won't get running trainers in the little ones. It would be like trying to put boys in football boots to walk out. I mean, you know, little study bottomed football boots are not what you want to go wandering. Horses for courses.
Thank you.
Oh, it's past. Have we run out of questions?
I think we're good for questions.
Okay.
We're good.
I think we can probably
There
call
we
it
are.
a day.
Unless anyone wants to ask anything else. Brilliant. Thank you all so much. It's lovely to see you all. I'll be sending through the feedback forms again, as per usual. I was going to try and put a link in here, but I can't find.
I can't honestly remember what we said we'd talk about next time.
So mums and dads and carers.
Oh my God, looking after mums and dads and carers, fantastic.
What's that going to entail? Can you give us a bit of a taster on that, Marion?
Yeah, I'm going to beat you all up for not looking after yourselves. Bad lifting, bad backs, lack of exercise, all those naughties that mummies and daddies do. Boys who are non-ambulant, get me up to sitting. No, not if they can sit themselves up. Don't take away opportunities to exercise. All those naughty things mummies and daddies do.
Okay.
And I've just seen somebody put their hands over their face when I said one of those.
Can I use that as a soundbite for the to advertise?
What's that? Beating up mummies and daddies. My GOS mummies and daddies know I will happily beat them up if they don't look after themselves. And I do it at conference, you know that.
Yeah.
I will beat up any mummy and daddy who's not looking after themselves too. We need to look after our mummies and daddies. It's so, so, so important.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marion, as always.
My absolute pleasure.
And
And
go on.
we didn't get stuck tonight. New broadband.
It was perfect this evening.
It was amazing. And you're beautifully landscape and shining and sparkly.
Amazing.
Just to
Thank
let
you,
everyone know,
BT.
we've always had some, not always, but the last few sessions we've
No, we
had,
have
there's been
frozen
cutting out.
quite a lot. Yeah. I'm only about 4 modems behind, but BT have actually, and I only screamed at them yesterday, I think. So that's not bad that I've got the modem today and set it all up. So there we are. Perfect.
I am very,
Didn't even need
very
a booster.
impressed.
Yeah,
Very
me
impressed.
too. Believe me, so my son's more impressed.
Oh, guys,
Made a big difference with box.
I'm just putting you a link here, guys. Oh, not that link.
Another one.
Oh no! Oh no! What's that link?
What have you just given them?
Goodness me! Who knows what that link is?
Well, Lynette, if there's any more questions, just send them to me.
I think that's it. I was going to pop a link for the feedback, but we can do that tomorrow, guys. Thank you so much, everybody.
No problem. Take care.
Thank you, Marion. All the best. See you all next week.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye.